Lessons learned. Hearing God clearly. Discerning God's voice became clearer when I stopped outsourcing responsibility for my decisions. For a long time, I believed hearing God clearly meant receiving constant direction, frequent signs, repeated confirmations, and unmistakable signals that removed all uncertainty. I thought clarity would arrive dramatically, decisively, and without effort on my part. What I learned instead is that faith doesn't remove responsibility, it refines it. God's guidance does not replace wisdom, it works through it. In leadership and entrepreneurship, this distinction matters deeply because waiting passively for direction can look like spiritual on the surface, but underneath, it often hides fear, avoidance, or indecision. I've learned that clarity is rarely handed to us fully formed. It's cultivated. There was a season where I was constantly asking for reassurance. I wanted to be sure. I wanted certainty. I wanted to know I couldn't get it wrong. And in that posture, I was unintentionally training myself to doubt what had already been revealed. Instead of moving forward with discipline, I was stalling under the guise of faith. What shifted everything was realizing that God often confirms wisdom rather than bypassing it. The more I grew in leadership, the more I understood that discernment requires participation. It requires stewardship of what you already know. It requires applying principles consistently instead of waiting for constant instruction. When I stopped looking for signs everywhere, numbers, coincidences, external validation, and started cultivating discipline, clarity followed. Discipline in prayer, discipline in reflection, discipline in action. Not emotional urgency, not spiritual anxiety, but steady obedience. Consistency created confidence, not arrogance, confidence. Confidence rooted in familiarity with God's character, confidence rooted in knowing how He has spoken before, confidence rooted in alignment rather than emotion. I learned that God is not confused and He is not chaotic. If something repeatedly produces confusion, instability, or pressure to rush, it deserves to be examined carefully. God's guidance carries clarity, even when the outcome is uncertain. It carries peace, even when the decision is difficult. Obedience created peace, not because everything was easy, but because I was no longer negotiating with what I already knew was right. Discernment matured when I stopped demanding constant reassurance and started trusting what had already been revealed. In leadership, this is critical. You cannot build, decide, or steward responsibility if you need external confirmation for every step. There is maturity that comes when you recognize that God expects you to apply wisdom, not suspend it. Faith does not eliminate thinking, it sharpens it. God often speaks through patterns, not interruptions, through consistency, not spectacle, through alignment, not urgency. I noticed that when I stayed disciplined, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, my discernment became sharper. I could distinguish between fear and caution, between excitement and confirmation, between pressure and purpose. And I stopped mistaking anxiety for urgency. Hearing God clearly became less about chasing moments and more about cultivating posture, a posture of humility, responsibility, and obedience. Leadership requires this kind of faith, the kind that doesn't need to be dramatic to feel real. the kind that doesn't rely on constant signs to feel secure, the kind that trusts God enough to move forward wisely. Spiritual maturity looks like stewardship. It looks like restraint. It looks like trust expressed through action. So my lessons learned is spiritual clarity grows through discipline, not through dependency.